If you've ever sat in a group conversation feeling like you had something to say but never said it, this video might explain more than you expect. Because people who stay quiet in groups are often misunderstood. Others assume they're shy, socially awkward, maybe insecure. But a lot of the time, that silence has very little to do with not having thoughts. In fact, quiet people are usually thinking too much. They're noticing the tone of the room, the timing of every interruption, the reactions people give each other, the shift in energy after someone speaks. They're calculating whether what they say will land correctly or change the atmosphere completely, and after a while, staying quiet starts to feel safer than participating wrong. It doesn't look like a big deal from the outside, but psychologically, it says a lot. Because some people learned very early that speaking can come with consequences. Maybe they grew up around strong personalities where interrupting was normal. Maybe they were ignored when they tried to express themselves. Maybe they were judged too quickly, misunderstood too often, or made to feel like their emotions were too much. So they adapted, not loudly, quietly. They became more observant, more careful, more internally focused, and over time, silence stopped being a reaction and became an identity. You can usually see it in small behaviors. They rehearse sentences in their head before speaking. They wait for the perfect moment to join a conversation. Then the moment passes. They start talking, get interrupted once, and decide not to try again. They notice details no one else seems to notice, but rarely say them out loud. And afterward, they replay the entire interaction alone. Not because they're dramatic, because their brain treats social interaction like something that needs to be managed correctly. For a lot of quiet people, group conversations don't feel natural. They feel unpredictable, and unpredictability creates tension, especially for people who became emotionally aware too early. Some people grow up constantly reading moods, watching facial expressions, listening to tone changes, trying to figure out what version of themselves will keep the environment stable. That kind of awareness follows you into adulthood. You enter a room and immediately scan the emotional atmosphere without realizing it. Who seems dominant? Who wants attention? Who gets ignored? Who changes when certain people walk in? Your nervous system starts analyzing before you even speak. And when your attention is focused on reading everyone else, it becomes harder to relax enough to simply exist in the conversation. That's why many quiet people leave social settings feeling exhausted, even when they barely spoke. Because silence doesn't mean nothing is happening internally. Sometimes it means too much is happening. And here's where it gets interesting. The real reason some people stay quiet isn't always fear. Sometimes it's control. Not controlling other people, controlling exposure. Because speaking reveals things. Your thoughts, your personality, your emotional state, your humor, your confidence, your uncertainty. And when someone has spent years protecting themselves from embarrassment, rejection, or misunderstanding, silence can become a form of emotional control. If I stay quiet, I can't say the wrong thing. If I stay quiet, nobody can judge what I really think. If I stay quiet, I stay safe. That's why some quiet people seem completely different one-on-one. In smaller settings where there's less emotional noise, they suddenly become expressive, funny, thoughtful, even intense. Because the issue was never having nothing to say, it was the environment. Group conversations reward speed, confidence, interruption, social rhythm. But many deeply observant people process internally first. They think before reacting. They analyze before speaking. And in fast-moving social spaces, that delay can make them appear disconnected when they're actually paying closer attention than anyone else. A lot of quiet people also carry a strange contradiction. They want connection, but fear visibility. They want to be understood, but hesitate to reveal themselves. So they stay close enough to belong, but distant enough to protect themselves. And after years of doing this, people start describing them the same way over and over. Reserved, hard to read, mysterious. But many of them aren't trying to be mysterious at all. They're just used to filtering themselves, used to minimizing their presence, used to believing that being unnoticed is emotionally safer than being fully seen. And the strange part is, the more emotionally aware someone becomes, the more difficult casual conversation can feel. Because they start noticing how much of social interaction is performance. How often people speak just to avoid silence. How many conversations stay on the surface? How often people hide discomfort behind humor, confidence, or constant talking? Quiet people tend to notice those things instinctively, and sometimes that awareness makes it harder to participate naturally, not because they think they're better than anyone, but because they struggle to disconnect from observation mode. They're watching while everyone else is performing, and eventually silence becomes familiar, not lonely, familiar. It becomes the place where they feel most in control of themselves. But silence also changes how people see you. When you don't speak much, others fill in the blanks for you. Some assume intelligence, others assume insecurity. Some project confidence onto you, others project weakness. And quiet people often experience something strange because of this, being misunderstood without ever explaining themselves, which only reinforces the pattern more. The less understood they feel, the less they speak, and the less they speak, the more invisible parts of them become. But underneath that silence is usually someone deeply aware of people, someone who notices shifts others miss, someone who learned that observation is safer than expression, someone who became emotionally careful long before they became emotionally understood. And that's why staying quiet in group conversations is rarely random. It's usually a pattern built slowly over years, a form of protection, a form of adaptation, a way of staying emotionally safe in environments that once felt unpredictable. Once you start seeing silence this way, you realize it was never just about being quiet. It was about what the silence was doing for them, protecting them, grounding them, hiding them, and maybe even defining them. Because sometimes the people saying the least are the ones carrying the most internally. And once you see that pattern, you can't really unsee it. If this explains something you felt but never fully understood, there's more to uncover. Understanding yourself is the beginning of everything.